Did Hollywood's brightest legends survive fame, or did the bottle claim them long before death did? Behind the tuxedos, red carpets, and perfect studio portraits, some of the Golden Age's most beloved stars were quietly drinking themselves into ruin. Tonight, we're uncovering 15 actors whose talent made them immortal, but whose private addictions shattered careers, bodies, marriages, and reputations. And the deeper we go, the more disturbing the pattern becomes. Number 15, Dana Andrews. Some actors fall in public, but Dana Andrews did something rarer. He admitted the fall before Hollywood could bury it. In Laura from 1944, Andrews looked like the perfect noir leading man, calm, controlled, handsome, and emotionally sealed behind a detective's stare. Then came The Best Years of Our Lives in 1946, where he played a returning veteran haunted by trauma. And suddenly, his quiet pain felt almost too real. Behind that polished screen presence, Andrews was fighting a brutal, private battle with alcohol, one that slowly damaged his career and reputation. The tragedy was not that he lacked discipline or talent. The tragedy was that he had too much pain and too few honest places to put it. As Hollywood changed, his drinking made him harder to insure, harder to cast, and easier to dismiss. But Andrews did not disappear into denial forever. In later years, he spoke openly about alcoholism and even helped raise awareness, which makes his story different from many others on this list. He was not just a ruined star. He became proof that even in a town built on pretending, confession could be its own kind of courage. Number 14, Lana Turner. Lana Turner was sold to America as pure glamour, but her real life often looked less like a dream and more like a scandal trying to survive the next headline. In The Postman Always Rings Twice from 1946, she became the image of dangerous desire. White clothes, cold confidence, and a face the camera seemed unable to abandon. But the woman behind that image carried years of romantic chaos, public judgment, and personal turbulence. Turner's career was built by a studio system that knew how to polish beauty into myth, but it did not know how to protect the person trapped inside it. Her struggles with drinking became part of a larger pattern of emotional survival, especially as her private life became tabloid property. The infamous killing of Johnny Stompanato by her daughter Cheryl Crane turned Turner's home into a national courtroom of gossip, suspicion, and sympathy. After that, every drink, every relationship, every appearance seemed to be weighed against her legend. Yet she kept working, kept returning, kept proving she was more than a scandal. Lana Turner's tragedy was not simply that fame damaged her. It was that Hollywood turned her pain into entertainment and then acted shocked when she bled. Number 13, Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner never behaved like a woman Hollywood could control, and that made her magnetic. But it also made her dangerous to herself. In The Killers from 1946, she walked onto the screen with the kind of beauty that did not ask for attention, it took it. By the time she became one of MGM's most glamorous stars, Gardner had already developed a reputation for living hard, loving recklessly, and refusing to soften herself for studio respectability. Her drinking was often described as part of her wild independence, but that romantic image hides the darker truth. Excess has a cost, even when it looks glamorous in photographs. Her marriages to Mickey Rooney, Artie Shaw, and Frank Sinatra turned her private life into a public storm, and the pressure only deepened the myth of Ava as the woman who could not be tamed. But the myth was heavier than it looked. Later health problems, emotional exhaustion, and career decline made the party seem less rebellious and more tragic. Gardner remained fiercely herself until the end, but that is the heartbreak. She beat the studios, the gossip columns, and the men who tried to define her, yet the bottle still left its mark. Number 12, Tallulah Bankhead. Tallulah Bankhead did not enter a room, she detonated inside it. By the time Alfred Hitchcock put her at the center of Lifeboat in 1944, Bankhead was already a legend of wit, appetite, scandal, and theatrical danger. She had the voice, the timing, the confidence, and the nerve to make every line feel like a confession whispered during a blackout. But Tallulah's off-screen life often became more famous than her work, and that was both her weapon and her curse. Drinking, partying, sharp-tongued remarks, and unapologetic behavior made her irresistible to journalists. But Hollywood has always loved wild women more as headlines than as human beings. Bankhead leaned into her reputation because it gave her power, but it also boxed her in. The more she became Tallulah the Outrageous, the harder it became for audiences and producers to see the disciplined actress underneath. Alcohol and excess gradually wore down her health and complicated her professional life, but she never lost that theatrical electricity. Her story feels almost modern, a woman punished for the same chaos men were allowed to market as charm. Tallulah did not fade quietly. She burned loudly, and Hollywood never fully knew whether to applaud or look away. Number 11. Robert Newton. Before pirates said "R," Robert Newton gave them a voice. Then watch that voice become louder than the man himself. In Treasure Island from 1950, Newton's Long John Silver became one of the most influential pirate performances in screen history, full of rolling menace, rough humor, and theatrical swagger. Children remembered the accent. Audiences remembered the grin. But behind the performance was a gifted actor whose alcoholism made him increasingly unreliable and difficult to protect. Newton had real talent, not just eccentricity. He brought danger and humanity to roles that could have been simple caricatures. Yet the drinking gradually became part of his professional identity in the worst possible way. Producers could admire him, audiences could love him, but the industry always measured whether he could show up, finish the work, and survive the pressure. His death at only 50 gave his legend a grim final twist. The man who helped define the screen pirate became another Hollywood cautionary tale about charm collapsing under addiction. Newton's tragedy is especially bitter because his greatest performance made him immortal, but it also trapped him in a comic image. The world kept hearing the pirate voice, while the real man behind it was slipping away. Number 10. Judy Garland. Judy Garland did not simply grow up in Hollywood. Hollywood grew around her like a beautiful machine with sharp teeth. In The Wizard of Oz from 1939, she became the voice of innocence, longing, and impossible hope, singing about somewhere over the rainbow while her own life was already being shaped by pressure most adults could not survive. Garland's struggle was not just alcohol. It was the result of a brutal studio system that controlled sleep, weight, image, emotion, and performance. Pills were used to keep young stars awake. Pills were used to make them sleep, and the human cost was treated like a business expense. As Garland aged, her voice remained extraordinary, but her private life became a cycle of exhaustion, dependency, comebacks, breakdowns, and public sympathy. The audience loved her most when she seemed wounded, which made her pain part of the performance. That is what makes her story so devastating. She did not lack talent, discipline, or courage. She gave more than most stars ever had to give. But Hollywood took the little girl from Kansas, turned her into an icon, and left the woman fighting battles the cameras could never fully show. Number 9. Alan Ladd. Alan Ladd looked like a man carved out of silence, but behind that stillness was a private torment Hollywood could not photograph. In Shane from 1953, he became the soft-spoken gunfighter audiences never forgot, wounded, noble, dangerous, and already half-ghost. That image worked because Ladd understood loneliness. Behind the blonde hair and controlled voice was a man carrying insecurity, insomnia, and emotional strain that fame never repaired. Alcohol became part of that darker pattern, not as glamorous rebellion, but as a dangerous escape from pressure, pain, and sleepless nights. His career had already made him a major star in noirs like This Gun for Hire from 1942. Yet the industry that elevated him also trapped him in an image of quiet masculinity. He was supposed to be calm, composed, untouchable, but real life was messier. As roles declined and personal struggles deepened, Ladd's screen presence began to feel haunted by something beyond acting. His death at 50 was ruled accidental, involving alcohol combined with sedatives and tranquilizers, which gave his legend a chilling final note. Alan Ladd's tragedy is that he spent his career playing men who survived violence, while his most dangerous enemy lived quietly inside the room with him. Number 8. W.C. Fields. W.C. Fields turned drunkenness into comedy so brilliantly that audiences forgot to ask where the joke ended. In The Bank, Dick from 1940, he perfected the image of the sneering, stumbling, suspicious little man who distrusted children, authority, marriage, and nearly everything sober society claimed to respect. His timing was razor-sharp, his voice unmistakable, and his public persona became inseparable from alcohol. That was the genius and the danger. Fields made drinking look like defiance, a comic shield against hypocrisy, boredom, and polite American manners. But when the bottle becomes a brand, the man behind it has fewer places to hide. Long before Hollywood sold chaos as personality, Fields understood that scandal could be profitable if you made it funny enough. Yet his health paid for the performance. Years of drinking contributed to the decline of his body, turning a once energetic vaudeville survivor into a symbol of excess wrapped in laughter. The tragedy is not simply that Fields drank, it is that audiences often loved him most when he seemed closest to ruin. He never asked to be respectable, and maybe that was his power. But the bottle that made the myth sparkle also helped close the curtain. Number 7. John Barrymore. John Barrymore had the face of a prince, the voice of a cathedral, and the self-destruction of a man running from his own greatness. In Grand Hotel from 1932, he still carried the elegance that made him one of the most admired actors of his generation. On stage, he had been a legend. On screen, he had presence without effort. But Barrymore's alcoholism became one of Hollywood's most devastating slow collapses, eating away at his discipline, memory, finances, and dignity. He came from theatrical royalty, yet fame did not protect him from humiliation. As his drinking worsened, stories of forgotten lines, erratic behavior, and professional decline began to overshadow the artistry that once made critics speak of him with awe. Hollywood can forgive scandal when it sells tickets, but it becomes cruel when a star's weakness stops being profitable. Barrymore's later appearances often carried a painful double image. The audience could still see the greatness, but they could also see the wreckage. That is what makes his fall so haunting. He was not a minor talent consumed by excess. He was a giant. And when a giant collapses in public, the sound echoes longer than applause. Number 6. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy looked like moral strength on screen, which made his private collapse feel even more unsettling. In Boys Town from 1938, he became the kind of actor audiences trusted instantly: honest, grounded, humane, and never showy. That was his magic. Tracy could make greatness look simple. But behind that natural authority was a man haunted by guilt, depression, insomnia, and severe alcoholism. His drinking did not fit the romantic Hollywood myth of champagne nights and charming misbehavior. It came in destructive binges, sudden disappearances, and painful episodes that frightened colleagues who admired him. Studios valued him because his performances were gold, but even they had to work around the damage. The contrast is what keeps viewers watching. How could a man so controlled in front of the camera be so powerless off it? His long relationship with Katharine Hepburn added another layer to the legend, but it did not erase the darker solitude underneath. Tracy kept delivering extraordinary work, from Captain's Courageous in 1937 to Inherit the Wind in 1960, even while his body and spirit carried the cost. His story proves talent can survive addiction for years, but never without collecting a terrible debt. Number 5. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart made cynicism look elegant, but the smoke, whiskey, and midnight sadness were not just props. In Casablanca from 1942, he became the face of wounded masculinity, bitter enough to be believable, romantic enough to be unforgettable, and tired enough to seem real. Bogart's hard-drinking persona fit the world of noir perfectly. He looked like a man who had already lost something before the scene began. That quality made him iconic, but it also blurred the line between character and lifestyle. In Hollywood's golden mythology, drinking could be marketed as toughness, sophistication, rebellion, or masculine charm. For Bogart, it became part of the legends surrounding his friendships, marriages, arguments, and late-night image. Yet glamour does not cancel consequence. His health declined, and he died at only 57 from esophageal cancer, after years in a culture where smoking and drinking were treated as almost inseparable from stardom. Bogart's tragedy is complicated because the very habits that darkened his legend also helped build the image audiences worshipped. He did not seem like a star pretending to be wounded. He seemed wounded already. And that is why his screen immortality still feels edged with loss. Number 4. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift did not fall from stardom all at once. He seemed to crack slowly, beautifully, and almost unbearably in front of the camera. In A Place in the Sun from 1951, he brought a new kind of male vulnerability to Hollywood. Sensitive, conflicted, inward, and emotionally exposed. Then, From Here to Eternity in 1953 confirmed him as one of the most intense actors of his generation. But after his devastating car accident in the mid-50s, Clift's life took a darker turn. Pain, medication, alcohol, and emotional distress became tangled together, and the industry began watching him with a mixture of admiration, pity, and unease. The tragedy of Clift is that even wounded, he could still act with frightening truth. His face changed, his confidence suffered, and his reputation became tied to the phrase, "the longest suicide in Hollywood," a cruel description often used for his slow decline. Yet he never became merely a cautionary tale. He remained an artist of rare sensitivity, able to turn damage into performance without making it feel cheap. Clift's story hurts because viewers can see both men at once, the brilliant star Hollywood wanted and the fragile human being Hollywood could not save. Number 3. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn sold adventure better than almost anyone in Hollywood, but real life became the reckless sequel nobody could control. In The Adventures of Robin Hood from 1938, he was pure cinematic motion, laughing, sword fighting, leaping through danger as if consequences belonged to other men. That image made him immortal. But off-screen, Flynn's appetite for alcohol, pleasure, scandal, and risk turned charm into a slow act of self-destruction. He became the symbol of the beautiful Hollywood rogue, the man who could drink too much, love too wildly, offend too many people, and still smile his way through the wreckage. For a while, audiences forgave everything because the fantasy was irresistible. Then the fantasy began to curdle. His health deteriorated, his looks faded early, his finances suffered, and the roles that once made him heroic became harder to believe. By the time he died at 50, the swashbuckler had become a warning about what happens when a studio-created legend consumes the man inside it. Flynn's tragedy is that he never fully separated performance from life. He played the fearless outlaw so convincingly that he seemed to forget even outlaws eventually pay. Number 2. William Holden. William Holden's smile could light up a screen, but his final chapter remains one of Hollywood's coldest reminders that charm does not protect anyone from addiction. In Sunset Boulevard from 1950, he played Joe Gillis, a man trapped by fame, money, desperation, and the ruins of old Hollywood. Decades later, that role feels almost prophetic. Holden became a major star, winning an Academy Award for Stalag 17 from 1953, and later bringing weary brilliance to films like The Wild Bunch from 1969 and Network from 1976. He had range, intelligence, and the kind of adult masculinity that aged into authority instead of vanity. But alcohol remained a recurring shadow in his life. It affected relationships, public incidents, and ultimately the way his story ended. In 1981, Holden died after a fall at home while intoxicated, a private accident that became a public symbol of lonely decline. That is why his entry cuts so deeply. He was not a forgotten actor fading at the margins. He was William Holden, talented, admired, still recognizable. His death felt brutally ordinary, and that made it even more devastating. Number 1. Richard Burton. Richard Burton's voice sounded built for kings, prophets, and doomed men, and somehow his life became all three. In Cleopatra from 1963, he became part of one of the most infamous Hollywood storms ever created. Massive budget, global publicity, and the volcanic romance with Elizabeth Taylor. But Burton was never just tabloid royalty. He was a serious actor with a Shakespearean gift, a magnetic screen presence, and 7 Academy Award nominations that proved Hollywood respected him even when it could not control him. Alcohol, however, followed him like a second shadow. Stories of Burton's drinking became legendary, sometimes almost mythic, but behind the spectacle was a body and career, paying a brutal price. He could still be astonishing, especially in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf from 1966, where marital warfare, alcohol, cruelty, and exhaustion seem to fuse into something dangerously real. That is what makes him the perfect final name. Burton did not lack talent. He had almost too much. He did not lack fame. He drowned in it. His death at 58 from a cerebral hemorrhage closed a life of brilliance, excess, love, damage, and refusal. He never stopped performing, even when the performance was destroying him. Behind every golden spotlight was a shadow the studios tried to hide. These stars gave audiences unforgettable performances, but privately paid for fame with broken health, damaged relationships, and lonely final chapters. Their stories are not just scandals, they are warnings. Hollywood made them legends, but the bottle kept collecting its price long after the cameras stopped rolling.